Hello and welcome to John's Author Diary for the weekend in February the 23rd, 2020. I've had this week off, so I've got nothing to report in terms of work and word counts or anything like that. So it's been the half-term holiday, which means my wife, who's a teacher, and my son are off for the week. So it's been great spending time with them. The weather, unfortunately, has been terrible this week. I think we've had storms for basically the last 2 weeks here in Morecambe, so we've not had much opportunity to get out of the house. I did take my son to see the Sonic the Hedgehog movie at the cinema. It's not very good. You know, I went to see Detective Pikachu last year with my son, which is a kind of similar concept where you've got the video game characters interacting with the real world, and that was so much better in terms of charm and storytelling and things like that, so I wouldn't recommend it. I had a bit of a shambolic journey last weekend. I went to see a friend who, well, he lives in Shipley, but we met in Skipton, which is kind of halfway between us. So I headed there on a Saturday, and the idea was we'd get a pub lunch and have a few beers and then go our separate ways. I'm visually impaired, so I was with my guide dog, and there were no notices, no announcements on the train as to which station we were actually stopping at. And I didn't know that the train was running late. I was on it, so I checked the time, and it was about the time I needed to get off. So I asked someone, I said, where are we? I said, I think this is Skipton, mate. So I got off the train, doors closed behind me, and I realised I was in Hellifield. This was basically the next stop along to Skipton, so I had to wait an hour till the next train arrived. Now, in the past, this would have really annoyed me, but I was quite chilled about it. There was a cafe there, so I went and got a cup of tea. I listened to a podcast, and then the next train came, so I ended up meeting my friend an hour later. We had beers, I had a steak, and decided because of the delay I'd get the next train back instead of the one I was going to. And while I was enjoying my steak and beers, there was a lot of heavy rain, and so the route back was flooded. We were basically stuck between two stations for about an hour and a half, and then we went back to Skipton very slowly. Now, while this was happening, there was a guy, and this was a guy who actually told me on the way where to get off. He was sat next to me again, and he was starting to freak out. He was getting very angry, punching seats, that kind of thing. That was a bit uncomfortable. And there were people behind me singing along with ABBA very loud and very drunkenly. So again, popped in my earphones, listened to a podcast, closed my eyes, tried to ignore them. And so I ended up back at Skipton, and then they put on a replacement bus, which went all around the Yorkshire Dales. There was no toilet on the bus. The heating was too high. I felt travel sick. Didn't actually vomit, but I was getting the cold sweats and feeling like I just needed to get off the bus. My guide dog hadn't been fed, so it was giving me the opportunity to practice patience, let's say. And so what should have been a 90-minute train journey ended up taking 5.5 hours, so I got home eventually at about 11:45. Now, my wife had warned me against going. She said, the weather doesn't look great, maybe consider staying at home instead. And over the previous months, maybe over the previous year, I tried a few times to arrange stuff with my friend, and I'd had to postpone a couple of times, rearrange, and I didn't want to do that again. So maybe I should have listened to a wife's advice. At least she didn't do the told you so kind of thing, so at least that was a positive. So in terms of reading, I finished The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I really enjoyed that book. I would highly recommend reading that. If you've not read The Handmaid's Tale, maybe read that first, because it is a sequel to that and it does refer to some of the events in the first book. But it's definitely a series I would check out if you haven't already. I'm currently reading Mastery by Robert Greene. So this is a book about how to become very good at something. I'm about a third of the way through that. I'm really enjoying it. I think there's a lot in there for people who are dedicated to a craft like I am with writing. As well as that, I'm also reading the Old Testament. So in the past, I've read Genesis before, dipped into bits here and there, but I've decided I'm going to just read it all. So I'm currently halfway through Exodus. It's a foundational text to Western culture, so I think it's a necessary read. I'm going to try and read a couple of books from the Bible each week, so I should probably get that done by the end of the year. Next week, I want to carry on with my first draft of The Devil, which is book 15 of the Ravenglass Chronicles. I would like to get that finished on Friday. I'll see how my voice is. My voice does feel a lot better than it did, as does my shoulder. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine, actually, who is a vocal coach, so he teaches people how to sing, and he was saying that the tightness in my throat could be related to my shoulder. He reckons that there's a possibility that those things are linked, and that when my shoulder improves and my posture improves, that will make my throat less tight, make my voice better. So if you want to ask me any questions on this podcast, please email me. It's john@johncronshaw.com. That's JONCRONSHAW. If you're an author, you might be interested in the Sci-Fi Roundtable this week. So I've posted a few episodes on there about story structure. So there's a couple from my old podcast called Stop Booking Around, which delve into Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. And we have a analysis of Star Wars and Transformers the movie from the 1980s, the one with Orson Welles and the best soundtrack ever. And then we've got an interview on the Sci-Fi Roundtable with Bonnie Milani, who's a structural editor, and she was trained in Hollywood. So she goes through story structure as well. So fascinating stuff if that is something you're interested in. So check out the Sci-Fi Roundtable. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. So until next time, cheerio.